Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another podcast of Threemarlet's Counter Monkey. Of course, inspired by the Spoony ones, please check out his Counter Monkey site. Some great advice for role playing. Now, I've talked about a couple things now, but I feel now I should kind of more of those things that I've talked about. The bumper car, Star Wars, and my epic first kill. Those are just personal experiences for me. And partially, as if you're going to be talking on the internet about role playing, you should talk about advice for other players. So this episode is going to be dedicated more to advising other players based on my own experiences. And one of the things I think is completely underutilized by a lot of players is acid. Now, me, for whatever reason, it's probably because in Mortal Kombat my favorite character is Reptile. So when the first time I played a sorcerer and I saw Acid Ball on the list, I was like, I'm getting that. Because I just want to have the ability to have, summon acid out of nowhere and just be like, pooh, throw it at you. That sounded cool. Well, I played with that, and it had utility. In fact, when I first time I played, I saw in the player's handbook they have the things you can buy. You can buy a flask of acid. I immediately started thinking, because I was supposed to be a rogue, I'm like, as a rogue, that is useful. And that every time I always now purchase, every time I build a new character, he always has a flask of acid on it. And I have found so many uses for acid that most players never think of, and most DMs never think of. Now, there's a couple things the flask of acid that makes it really useful. One, you don't want it in an obvious jar. When you get in your flask of acid, make sure you kind of somewhat mention or something when you say, okay, I'm going to purchase a flask, like a whiskey style flask of acid. Because as soon as you say that, the DM's probably not going to think of anything and be like, sure, yeah, okay, alright, you purchased that. Yeah, that's whatever gold. Because normally as soon as they sign off on that, you got them. You have to be careful of this, because this is what, or at the very least, if they say no, it's in a bottle form, immediately go out and try to find something that looks like a flask, a normal drinking flask that can hold acid. Be careful about your DMs. Some of them are going to try to pull, well, you put it in a metal container, it's going to eat out the container. Now it's leaking in your bag and ruins all your equipment. No. You got to make sure it can hold the acid. But now, once you get the acid, if you're playing an evil character or an assassin character, here's the really useful stuff. Acid is really deadly if you ingest it. And characters are always drinking stuff in these games. And this is a perfect example of, well, actually, I didn't use the flask in this case. This is when I was playing a sorcerer. I'll explain one of the first times I used this as a method. This was during an evil campaign, and at some point we're getting into a tiff with the orc and another character who was an orc, and he wanted to, I forget what he was doing. He's like, we were angry, so of course he does the ink. Orc, I'm going to hit you with my bow, because I'm just angry with your character telling me what to do, so I'm going to hit you with my bow. So I was like, acid ball. Instead of hitting my face, he hits a ball of acid. And it completely wrecks his bow. And apparently this was a really, really nice bow. And the other player, who is another evil sorcerer, is like, look, you gotta replace the guy's bow now. Because apparently, we were, I guess he was evil, but he was practical evil. And he took on the idea of I've got all these numbskulls I'm supposed to be in charge of, and now they're fighting, and now the orc doesn't have his bow because the other fucking sorcerer was messing with him again. Fuck, you gotta replace his bow. I'm like, what? Oh, fine. I will I will get him another bow. And I made sure my character said that, because it didn't say I was going to buy a bow or it was going to be just as good. So I had my character go out to the marketplace. I'm like, I'm going to look for a hunter. Yeah, I rolled a look, and they give me a description. Oh yeah, there's an elf sitting in the corner. I'm like, is he drinking anything? I'm looking for one near a tavern or something, one that's drinking stuff. And they go, yeah, he's drinking a beer there. I'm like, okay. When he's looking the other way, I summon a ball of acid. I summon a tiny ball of acid. This is using your combat skills and trying to figure out, especially for wizards. A lot of people think only of utility, which is unfortunately 4th edition. That's what I really hated about 4th edition when it comes to magic, because like everything is just combat ability. One of the fun things with being a wizard or sorcerer or anybody with magic was how you can use them in role-playing, and sometimes a lot of times avoid combat, like in this case. Or in this case also, avoid going to a store and purchasing a bow, cheap-ass bow. So I summoned a small ball of acid, and since I also had telekinesis, I was able to do, there wasn't any question about whether I could accurately put the ball in this direction. I have this, as nobody's looking, kind of have the ball float over the few feet and drop into the guy's cup of ale. After about a minute, the guy decides to reach down, grab his cup, take a swig, and he goes, brrr, drops dead as the acid eats away at his esophagus. Oh wow! Everyone, of course, stops, looks up. Apparently this is one of those bars where somebody just can keel over down. It's like, oh wow, look what happened. Oh, everyone gathers around. I gather around too. I grab his bow. Apparently a bow wasn't on his corpse. It was, I guess, like sitting next to his chair. But I wasn't doing no stealth check. I'm not a thief. Nobody else was using it. Obviously he's not, so I'm just going to take this bow. Take the bow, walk in, give it to him. Give it to the orc. It wasn't as good as his previous one, but what the hell? Who's gonna care? And that's voila. And you know what? If you're playing as another character, you can do that technique a lot. Even if you don't have the ability to kind of put an acid ball in somebody, that's really useful. A way to take somebody out is just drop some acid in their drink and let them drink. As long as no one sees you dropping that acid in there, boom, no one's gonna, it's like poison. Only there's no resist poison bullshit. You just drink acid. They can't. That is what really will annoy the DMs. They go, well, he has resist poison. Like, he's not poisoned. What do you mean he's not? He's got acid. There's acid in his esophagus. It's eating out his esophagus. It's physically ruining the stuff. It's not poison because it's not classified as a poison. And again, you can actually point to the fact that magic wielding characters can summon balls of acid. It's then kind of the same way as if a character can summon frost or fire. You wouldn't roll a poison check if you lit the guy on fire. So a DM will be like, oh, damn, he's right. Ooh. You can call the BS on the DM on that. And that's really thinking outside the box. And that's what I mean. This is one of those really great tools that even DMs don't think about. They might have a character. They might know you might try to poison this particular individual, make you have to fight him. Not if you got the acid and you do that trick. Bingo right there. No poison resist. There's no check on that. If he drinks it in his esophagus, he is dead. There's no spitting that out either, because once it's in, it's in. Now, the other thing is to think with acid is, if you have acid, you can just melt the locks. Make sure you get, like, the good stuff. If you're ever in a place and, like, I can't lockpick this thing, just take the acid, just melt the bars. You've got something that can melt bars. It can melt through the ropes. It's really useful for that stuff. So if you're dungeoneering, you don't have lockpick skills, keep some acid nearby, because most of the time a DM will be like, okay, a lot of times DM will kind of go, okay, you're thinking outside the box. I'm going to give you this. You can't lockpick this stuff, so you find another way. They might call BS on like a really important special lock or magical lock or something, something where you have to get the key. But if it's like a minor thing, and it's a minor like, just a regular check, and you're crap with getting locks done, you can use the acid to kind of get through. It's also a great way of sometimes making like a hole. If you can say there's like a small, like you're in a castle, you know something's going downstairs, you can maybe use the excuse you use the acid to like melt a small hole so you can look through it. That one, the DM might like decide to throw that right back at you. Okay, as you reach down and put your eye against that hole with the they just put acid in, your eye burns. Be wary of that one. Now here's the other big one. This is why I say use a flask of acid that looks like a whiskey flask. Ideally, you want to actually get 2 of those flasks. One that you actually put actual whiskey in, one that you keep the acid in. And here's the trick. You specifically say where you normally will hold the acid one, like you take like your knife, your sword or whatever, and you like, make some bunch of scratches on it. So as you feel that one, as soon as you grab it, you know, that's the acid one. Don't like that one. And this is where it comes tricky. And if again, you don't want to overuse the acid thing, because then the DM might throw this at you. But you keep this normally handy, because if you're ever captured, this is another good thing to have. Well, there's 2 ways. One, this is a take on the acid in a drink thing. Is if you have to get into a castle and there's a guard out there, and as long as you're kind of in a neutral town, there's people running around, you have your flask of acid, you're drinking, you have your other player, passing that, go kind of right in front of the guard. And you should actually roll, if like it's a castle and there's several entrances, roll to see whichever entrance is guarded by like the one guard that looks like the most serious, or most tired, most wanting to get off work soon. And you do this right in front of him, and you kind of go to put your flask right back into your bag, and then you once your hand's in there, and you don't want it. By the way, the flask should not be in a flask bag. You want it in a little bit of a bigger pouch, so you can pull this off. So the DM won't call, well, it's obvious you grabbed a different one. No. If it's nice, big, a decent sized leather pouch where you can maybe have this a couple things in there. So you can't pull that. Well, you can't really tell what I did in that bag. You put the bag in, you put the flask in, you look up and you go, oh guard, let me get that out. Let me get you one, because you're saving the city. And the other one, what you pull out is the acid one. Again, this is why I'm saying you put the marks around like wherever you would normally hold it. So as soon as you put your hand in, you can feel which flask you have without having to look at it. Pull that out, hand it to the guard and go, oh, here you go, man, have a drink. And since, again, you can argue with the bluff check should be reduced because the guard just saw you drink what looks to be that same exact flask. He's got to be looking extremely closely to notice a few scratches near the the rim of the flask or whatever. And boom, same thing. He takes a drink. And if he says he smells it, and he goes, this smells like acid, it's like, well, of course it smells like acid. It's a fruit rum, you fool, and it's the good stuff, too. Again, role play with these scenarios. If they say, this smells like acid, of course, it's an acidy drink. It's a fruit rum, you fool. And of course it smells horrible. If it didn't, it wouldn't be the good stuff. A DM might decide to go, you know what, that's a good excuse. Alright, the guard drinks. Boom, he's dead. Done the same thing. Now this is where it becomes really tricky and really pulling this on the DM. This is kind of like sometimes you can get the acid over on the DM with it not being a poison. This is how, if you get captured, this is where you can get really tricky and possibly go make the DM a little PO'd. But hey, it's outsmarting the DM, which sometimes is alright. A lot of DMs will occasionally enjoy the players kind of outsmarting them. Occasionally. You do the same setup, what I just said. You have your pouch with your 2 bottles in it, and you say maybe you have a food or something in there, and when you're captured, they said, okay, you've been captured, you've been brought to the your cell, and go, well, I'm kind of bored. I'm going to reach into my leather pouch or leather bag pocket. It's great if you can say it's actually part of just to be able to pull this thing off. You might want to say it's like part of your outfit somehow. But it's like not a huge pouch, because they might legitimately take that. It's just the right size pouch where you can just have a couple little items in there. and go, well, I reach into my pouch, take out my apple, and eat it because we're a little bored. Always keep like a thing of food in there, just so you can pull off this excuse. And the DM will normally go, okay, yeah, okay, you're eating your apple, all right. And then go, well, I think I know a way out of here. You reach into your bag and you pull out your flask of acid. And if the DM goes, well, you don't have that, I'm like, you go, why would they not have that? You just said, I have my apple, so they obviously let me keep the pouch. Or he goes, damn it. The other way, or you can just go, I reach in, let me have a drink of my whiskey, because I'm just gonna let them talk and bored. And as soon as he says they had your flask of whiskey, as long as the DM kind of waves, okay, I'm gonna let these two argue. You got to do this kind of in the background, and hopefully your character's the type that you can get away with this. Like, okay, well my character has kind of give up. He's gonna lead these, the other party members to figure this. I'm just gonna lean back and grab my flask of whiskey. Don't let that part on. And drink back on my little cot bed back there. And then after like a couple of lines, go, you know what? I think I have a solution for this. I pull out my flask of acid, because now the DM is really going to have a hard time saying, well, they let you keep the flask of whiskey, but not the flask of acid, because it should look like there's just two flasks. And that's when you get them with the lockpick maneuver or something else. You can be a ton of different things. You can now all of a sudden you have an effective weapon. That's not magic, so they can't know non-magical abilities. In fact, you might want to make sure, like with the door, if it has grating or something, you can just throw it through. Because again, this might be your solution. You can throw the acid into the guard's eyes or something along those lines. Maybe offer him a drink. Do the same kind of trick I just said. You drink the one and go, hey guard, what? I know what's up in a prison like this. You got to make sure you treat your guards right. And of course, you give him the acid flask and he takes a drink. Same routine. Or you use the acid to break the lock on the door. But as soon as basically the DM acknowledges you have that acid, you have all those tools open to you. Oh, and this is the other one. If you're ever chained up, like they have chains on you, or you have, like some sort of ancient handcuff type setups, that's another thing. You can kind of use the acid to, if it's just like a handcuff and you want to have your hands more free, you shouldn't even have to pass a check just to put the acid in the middle of the chain. If it's like you're trying to actually melt the locks off, you might have to be careful. You might burn yourself. So DM might make you have to do that or roll for that. But anyway, it's the wonderful thing of acid. So I guess we'll entitle this episode the acid flavored latte, because based on the first time I actually started figuring out all these uses for acid. Is there anything else you can use with that material? Not much. Just be careful when you throw it. I did have one time as a sorcerer. We were in a battle in the middle of a swamp, and this was Evil Campaign again, I think. It was either evil or neutral, and we were in a battle with gnolls in the swamp, and like I did an epic fail. I botched a roll when I was throwing the balls of acid around, and the DM goes, apparently it was not like it wasn't a 1. It was like you rolled a 2. And I guess with our house rules is like 2 you really fuck up and hurt somebody, but if it's like a 1, that's when you either you throw the acid in your buddy's face. It's like, well, 2 you didn't do that, so, but it's still like a botch. So you throw the ball and it just goes completely off the side, flying out way off in the other direction. And after about 2 minutes, or not 2 minutes, after a few seconds, you hear out in the distance, "Oh my God, my face! Ah!" And you hit a random fisherman way out in the distance fishing on his raft, and you have killed him. Which, by the way, that came into play later, because later on, the fisherman's nephew came looking. "Have you seen my grandfather? He was out fishing. I found his boat, but because I think we actually wound up going over, and like his boat eventually kind of drifted down towards us, and we're like, oh, Hey, now we got a boat. But that was fun. So be careful where you throw that shit. It can cause some damage. Alright. That is it. Stay tuned for more adventurers. I've got plenty more to come. I know I've promised a couple of the evil campaign ones and a couple of our good campaigns. A couple of this advice for DMs and for players on how to abuse DMs, other than the one I just gave. Hasta luego.